The supermarket was loud in that tired, end-of-day way, when people no longer spoke but snapped, when carts bumped into ankles and the air smelled of bread, detergent, and impatience. Fluorescent lights hummed above the long rows of shelves. At the last register, a young cashier with perfectly shaped eyebrows scanned items with mechanical speed, her mouth pressed into a thin line. In front of her stood a woman no older than 30, though exhaustion made her seem older. 3 children clung to her coat. One boy tugging at her sleeve, a girl rubbing her eyes, and a baby asleep in a battered stroller. The woman's coat was too thin for the season, her shoes worn at the heels. She placed items on the counter carefully, as if afraid they might break. Bread, pasta, the cheapest sausages, a small bag of apples, milk. The cashier announced the total. The number seemed to echo louder than it should have. The woman flinched. She opened her wallet, revealing a few crumpled bills and a handful of coins. Her fingers shook as she counted. "One moment. I think I have, please," she murmured, more to herself than to anyone else. People in line shifted and sighed. Someone clicked their tongue. The cashier leaned back in her chair and glanced dramatically at the growing queue. "If you don't have enough, decide faster," she said. "There are people waiting." "I'll put this back," the woman whispered, reaching for the milk. "And maybe the apples." The little girl clutched the bag of fruit. "Mama, please," she said quietly. The cashier snorted. "No loitering. Either pay or step aside." That was when the old man spoke. "Is there a reason you're talking to her like that?" His voice was calm, low, but it carried. He stood behind them, tall despite his age, his coat simple, his shoes polished but old. His hair was white, his face lined deeply, yet his eyes were sharp, observant, almost unsettlingly attentive. He had been watching silently, but now the room seemed to shift toward him. The cashier rolled her eyes. "Sir, mind your own business." He nodded slowly, as if considering her words. "My business," he said, "is not letting someone be humiliated for being poor." A ripple moved through the line. The cashier straightened. "If you want to play hero, that's not my problem." The old man reached into his pocket and placed his bank card on the counter with deliberate care. "Scan everything," he said. "All of it." The cashier blinked. Then, with a tight smile, she rescanned the items, this time with exaggerated speed, the scanner beeping sharply. The receipt rolled out, long and curling. She announced the total again, louder than necessary. The old man entered his code without hesitation. The transaction approved. Silence fell, thick and awkward. He gathered the bags and gently pushed them toward the woman. "For your children," he said. "No one should have to choose between feeding them and keeping their dignity." The woman stared at him as if she couldn't quite understand what had happened. Her lips trembled. I can't." Tears spilled despite her effort to stop them. "Thank you. Thank you so much." The children watched him with wide eyes. The little boy whispered, "Mama, is he a grandpa?" The old man smiled faintly. "Something like that." As the woman bent to lift the bags, something slipped from her coat pocket and fluttered to the floor. A small, folded photograph, worn thin at the edges. The old man instinctively bent to pick it up. The moment his fingers touched it, he froze. The photo showed a man standing outdoors, wearing work clothes, his arm around the same woman, both smiling. The man's face was familiar in a way that made the old man's chest tighten painfully. Not familiar like a stranger seen before, but like a ghost from a locked room of memory. He stared too long. The woman noticed. "That's my husband," she said softly. "Or, he was. He disappeared 5 years ago. Went to work and never came back. They never found him." The old man's throat felt dry. "What was his name?" he asked, though part of him already knew. She said it. The name struck him like a blow. His hand trembled slightly as he returned the photo. He studied it more closely now, the scar near the man's cheek, the shape of his eyes, the stance that spoke of quiet strength. Memory surged, uninvited. 5 years ago. A different city. A construction site tied to people who didn't like witnesses. A man who had seen something he shouldn't have. A choice made in a narrow corridor under buzzing lights. The old man closed his eyes for a second. When he opened them, the cashier was staring nervously, sensing something she couldn't name. "Did he work construction?" the old man asked. "Yes," the woman replied, confused. "How did you know? Did he ever mention An accident. He continued gently. Or being asked to sign something. Her breath hitched. He said there were men there who scared him. He wanted to report them. I begged him not to. The old man inhaled slowly. The past, buried under years of silence and money, was clawing its way up. I owe you more than groceries, he said quietly. The woman stiffened. What do you mean? He leaned closer so only she could hear. Your husband didn't abandon you. He tried to do the right thing. Her eyes filled again, but this time with confusion and fragile hope. You know something. I know where he is, the old man said. And I know why no one found him. The world seemed to narrow around them. The cashier cleared her throat loudly, but no one paid attention now. Is he? The woman couldn't finish the question. The old man paused. For the first time, his composure cracked. He's alive, she gasped, one hand flying to her mouth. The children sensed the shift and fell silent. He was taken, the old man continued. Hidden. I was part of the system that made that possible. She stared at him, horror and hope colliding. You did this. I allowed it, he said. I chose money and safety over a man's family. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, quietly, why tell me now? He looked at the cashier, then at the line of people watching. Because today I saw how easily people forget their humanity. And because I'm tired of carrying this alone. He straightened, his voice firm. I can take you to him. But it won't be easy. And it will change everything. Tears streamed down her face, but her voice was steady. I don't care. I just want my children to see their father. The old man nodded. He reached into his coat and wrote something on the back of the receipt. This address. Tomorrow morning. She took it with shaking hands. Thank you, she whispered. For everything. As she left, the cashier looked down, suddenly very small behind the counter. The old man met her gaze. Kindness, he said calmly, costs nothing. But cruelty always comes with a bill. He turned and walked out of the supermarket, leaving behind a stunned silence, a humbled cashier, and a woman whose life had just been torn open by truth and hope. The supermarket was loud in that particular way that only happens late in the evening, when everyone is tired and no one wants to be there anymore. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, casting a pale, unforgiving glow over the aisles. Somewhere near the frozen food section, a child was crying, the sound sharp and desperate. Carts rattled, plastic wheels squeaking against the tiled floor. The smell of fresh bread mixed with detergent and cheap coffee hung heavy in the air. At the last register stood a young cashier with immaculate makeup and a bored, irritated expression. Her fingernails tapped against the counter between scans, each movement sharp, impatient. In front of her was a woman who looked like she had already used up all the strength she had for the day. Her coat was thin, clearly not meant for the cold outside, and it hung loosely on her narrow shoulders. Dark circles framed her eyes. 3 children clung to her, 2 standing, one asleep in a scratched, old stroller with a broken cup holder. The woman carefully placed her groceries on the counter, one by one, as if hoping that gentleness might somehow lower the price. A loaf of bread, a pack of pasta, a small bag of rice, milk, a few apples in a thin plastic bag. No sweets, no extras. The cashier scanned the last item and announced the total in a loud, flat voice. The number seemed too big for such a small pile of food. The woman's face drained of color. She opened her wallet, revealing a few crumpled bills and scattered coins. Her fingers shook as she counted, lips silently moving. She glanced at her children, then back at the money. I'm sorry, she whispered. Just a second. I think I have enough. Behind her, someone sighed loudly. Another person checked their phone with exaggerated movements. The cashier leaned back slightly, arms crossed. If you don't have enough, decide quickly, she said, her tone sharp. You're holding up the line. I'll put something back, the woman said hurriedly. She reached for the milk. Maybe this, and the apples. The little girl clinging to her coat shook her head. Mama, please, she said in a small voice, hugging the bag of fruit as if it were treasure. The cashier rolled her eyes. No drama. Either pay or step aside. That was when a calm voice cut through the tension. There's no need to speak to her like that. Everyone turned. An old man stood behind them in line. He was tall, though his shoulders were slightly stooped with age. His coat was simple, dark, well cared for. His shoes were old but polished. His white hair was neatly combed back, and deep lines marked his face, not from bitterness, but from years lived deliberately. His eyes were sharp, clear, and unsettlingly focused. The cashier scoffed. "Sir, mind your own business." The old man nodded slowly, as if he had expected that response. "I am," he said quietly. "Because how we treat people in moments like this tells us who we really are." The cashier's lips tightened. "If you want to pay for her, go ahead. Otherwise, I do," the old man interrupted gently. He reached into his pocket and placed his bank card on the counter. "Scan everything. All of it." The cashier hesitated, then smirked and began scanning again, faster this time, the beeping loud and aggressive. The receipt spilled out, curling onto the counter. She announced the total again, louder than before. The old man entered his code without hesitation. "Approved." The sound seemed to echo. He gathered the bags and slid them toward the woman. "For your children," he said softly. "Food should never be a luxury." The woman stared at him, stunned. Her eyes filled instantly with tears. I don't know what to say," she whispered. Thank you so much." The children stared at him with wide eyes. The boy tugged on his sleeve. "Mama, is he rich?" The old man smiled faintly. "No," he said. "Just old enough to know what matters." As the woman bent to lift the bags, something slipped from her coat pocket and fell to the floor. A small photograph, folded many times, edges soft and worn. The old man bent to pick it up. The moment his fingers closed around it, something inside him stopped. The photograph showed a man standing outdoors, sunlight on his face. He wore work clothes, dust on his boots, his arm wrapped around the same woman who now stood trembling in front of him. Both were smiling. Real smiles, the kind that come from hope rather than convenience. The old man's breath caught. He stared at the face too long. Too intensely. The woman noticed. "That's my husband," she said quietly. "Or, he was." The old man looked up slowly. "Was. He disappeared," she said. 5 years ago. Went to work one morning and never came back." The world seemed to tilt. The old man swallowed. His fingers tightened slightly on the photograph. The man's face. There was no doubt. The scar near the cheek. The eyes. The memory slammed into him with brutal clarity. 5 years ago. Another city. Another life. "What's his name?" the old man asked, though his voice betrayed him now, rougher than before. She said the name. It felt like a confession. The old man returned the photograph, his hand trembling despite his effort to control it. "Did he work construction?" he asked. "Yes," she replied, startled. "How do you know? Did he ever mention trouble at work?" He continued. "People asking him to stay quiet." Her eyes widened. "He said something wasn't right. He wanted to report it. I begged him not to. We needed the money." The old man closed his eyes briefly. He saw it all again. The illegal contracts, the bribed inspectors, the accident that wasn't supposed to be talked about. A man who had seen too much. A file placed on a desk. A decision made without thinking about faces, only numbers. "I owe you more than groceries," he said quietly. Her breath hitched. "What do you mean?" "I know what happened to your husband," he said. "And I know why no one found him." The noise of the supermarket faded. Even the cashier sensed something had changed and stood frozen, watching. "Is he?" The woman couldn't finish the sentence. "He's alive," the old man said. The word landed like an explosion. Her knees nearly gave way. She grabbed the counter for support. "Alive," she whispered. "You're sure?" "Yes," he said. "He was taken, hidden, paid off to disappear." "You did this?" she asked, her voice shaking, not with anger, but with disbelief. "I allowed it," he replied. "I was part of the system that made sure men like him vanished quietly." Tears streamed down her face. "Why tell me now?" "Because today I saw you being treated like you didn't matter," he said. "And because I've been trying to outrun my past for years. I'm tired." The cashier cleared her throat nervously. The line behind them was silent now, people pretending not to listen while hearing every word. "I can take you to him," the old man said. "But you need to understand, he's not living the life he once had. And this will bring consequences." "I don't care," the woman said without hesitation. "My children deserve to see their father." The old man nodded. He wrote an address and a time on the back of the receipt and handed it to her. Tomorrow morning. She clutched it like something sacred. Thank you, she whispered again and again. That night, the old man didn't sleep. He sat in his dark apartment, city lights blinking outside the window, the past pacing endlessly through his mind. He had built his fortune on silence, on looking the other way. He had convinced himself it was necessary, that the world worked that way. But now there were children's faces in his thoughts. And a photograph. Morning came gray and cold. The woman arrived early, children bundled in mismatched coats. The old man was already waiting, leaning against a black car. He opened the door without a word. The drive took hours. No one spoke much. The children eventually fell asleep, unaware that their lives were about to change. They stopped at a small, forgotten town. A low building stood at the edge, half abandoned. The old man led them inside. In a small room sat a man with tired eyes and a beard streaked with gray. When he looked up and saw her, time collapsed. She cried out his name. He stood, frozen, then moved forward as if afraid she might disappear. They held each other, sobbing, years of loss breaking loose all at once. The children stared, confused. Papa? The little girl asked hesitantly. He dropped to his knees, hands shaking. Yes, he whispered. I'm here. The old man turned away, his eyes wet. Later, as they prepared to leave together, the woman approached him. What will happen to you? She asked. He looked at the road ahead. I'll pay my debts, he said. In whatever way I still can. As he watched the family drive away, laughter filling the car for the first time in years, the old man felt something he hadn't felt in decades. Not relief. Redemption. The supermarket breathed like a tired animal at the end of the day. Its automatic doors sighed open and shut, letting in bursts of cold air mixed with street noise. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, flattening colors and faces alike, making everyone look paler, sharper, more irritable than they probably were. Shopping carts rattled across the tiled floor, bumping heels and scraping metal against metal. Somewhere between the canned goods and the freezers, a baby cried until a shushing voice finally calmed it. At the last register, the line moved slowly. A young cashier sat behind the counter, her posture stiff, her expression hardened by boredom and routine. She scanned items with quick, practiced movements, nails tapping impatiently between each beep. She did not look at people for long, only long enough to judge how much trouble they might be. In front of her stood a woman with 3 children and a stroller that had clearly seen better days. The stroller squeaked softly whenever it moved, one wheel slightly crooked. The woman's coat was thin and faded, its buttons mismatched. Her hair was pulled back hastily, strands escaping around her tired face. There was a kind of quiet panic in her eyes, the kind that came from counting money before it was even time to pay. She placed her groceries on the counter slowly, carefully, as if hoping gentleness might somehow reduce the cost. Bread, pasta, rice, a small carton of milk, a net bag with a few apples. No meat, no sweets, nothing unnecessary. The cashier scanned the last item and announced the total. The number landed heavily in the air. The woman flinched. Her hand tightened around her worn wallet. She opened it, revealing a few crumpled bills and coins gathered from different pockets. Her fingers trembled as she counted, lips moving silently. Just a moment, she whispered. Please. Behind her, someone sighed loudly. Another person shifted their weight and checked their phone, the screen lighting up their impatient face. The cashier leaned back slightly, crossed her arms, and looked past the woman as if she weren't really there. If you don't have enough, you'll need to decide quickly, the cashier said sharply. There are people waiting. I'll put something back, the woman said quickly, panic creeping into her voice. She reached for the milk. This, and maybe the apples. Her little daughter clutched the bag of fruit with both hands. Mama, she whispered, eyes wide, please. The woman's throat tightened. The cashier rolled her eyes. I don't have all night, she said. Either pay or step aside. The words hung in the air, sharp and humiliating. Then a calm, steady voice cut through the tension. There's no need to speak to her like that. Everyone turned. An old man stood behind them in line. He was tall, though his shoulders were slightly stooped with age. His coat was simple, dark, well maintained. His hair was white, neatly combed back. Deep lines crossed his face, but his eyes were alert, intelligent, and unsettlingly focused. The cashier scoffed. Sir, this doesn't concern you. The old man nodded slowly. It does, he said quietly. It concerns anyone who still remembers what it's like to struggle. The cashier straightened, irritation flashing across her face. If you want to help, then help. Otherwise, I do, the old man said. He stepped forward and placed his card on the counter. Scan everything. All of it. The cashier hesitated, then smirked and rescanned the items with exaggerated speed. The beeping grew louder, sharper. The receipt spilled out in a long, curling strip. She read the total again, this time almost triumphantly. The old man entered his code without hesitation. Approved. For a moment, no one spoke. He gathered the bags and gently slid them toward the woman. For your children, he said softly. Food should never be a source of shame. The woman stared at him, stunned. Her eyes filled with tears she could no longer hold back. I don't know how to thank you, she whispered. The children watched him with wide, curious eyes. The little boy tugged at his sleeve. Mama, he whispered, is he a magician? The old man smiled faintly. No, he said, just someone who's lived long enough to regret a few things. As the woman bent to lift the bags, something slipped from her coat pocket and fell to the floor. A small, folded photograph, worn thin at the edges from being handled too often. The old man bent to pick it up. The instant his fingers touched the photograph, his body went still. The picture showed a man standing outdoors, sunlight on his face. He wore dusty work clothes, one arm wrapped around the woman now standing before him. Both were smiling. Not posed smiles, but real ones, full of hope. The old man's breath caught. The face stared back at him from the past. The woman noticed his reaction. That's my husband, she said softly. Or, he was. The old man looked up slowly. Was. He disappeared, she said. 5 years ago. Went to work one morning and never came back. The noise of the supermarket seemed to fade. The old man's fingers tightened slightly around the photograph. He recognized the man instantly. The scar near the cheek. The eyes. The memory rose like a storm he had spent years pretending didn't exist. 5 years ago. Another city. A construction site tied to illegal contracts and bribes. A man who had seen something he shouldn't have. What's his name? The old man asked, though his voice already knew the answer. She said it. The name struck him like a confession. He returned the photograph, his hand trembling despite his effort to control it. Did he work construction? He asked quietly. Yes, she replied, startled. How did you know? Did he ever mention trouble? The old man continued. Men who didn't want questions asked. Her eyes widened. He said something was wrong. He wanted to report it. I begged him not to. We needed the money. The old man closed his eyes briefly. He saw the office again. The file placed neatly on his desk. The recommendation written in neutral language. The choice framed as necessary, practical, harmless. A man relocated, paid to disappear. A family left behind without answers. I owe you more than groceries, he said quietly. The woman's breath caught. What do you mean? I know what happened to your husband, he said. And I know why no one ever found him. The cashier shifted nervously behind the counter, sensing something serious unfolding. The people in line had fallen silent. Is he? The woman couldn't finish the sentence. He's alive, the old man said. The word shattered the air. Her knees buckled, and she gripped the counter to steady herself. Alive, she whispered. You're sure? Yes, he said. He was forced to disappear. Given a new identity. Kept far away. You did this? She asked, her voice shaking, not with anger, but disbelief. I allowed it, he replied. I signed off on it. I told myself it was for the greater good. Tears streamed down her face. Why tell me now? Because today I watched you be humiliated for being poor, he said. And because I'm tired of pretending my past doesn't have faces. He took a pen and wrote an address and a time on the back of the receipt. Tomorrow morning, he said. If you want answers. She clutched the paper like it might disappear. I'll be there, she said. No matter what. That night, the old man didn't sleep. He sat alone in his apartment, city lights blinking outside the window. His reflection stared back at him from the glass, older than he felt, heavier with memories. He had spent decades building wealth, influence, safety. He had told himself it was all necessary. But now there was a woman's face in his mind. And 3 children. And a photograph he could no longer forget. Morning came cold and gray. The woman arrived early, her children bundled in coats that didn't quite fit. The old man was already waiting beside a black car. He opened the door without a word. The drive took hours. The road stretched endlessly ahead. The children eventually fell asleep, unaware that their lives were about to change. They stopped at a quiet, forgotten town. A low building stood at the edge, unremarkable, almost invisible. Inside, a man sat alone at a small table. His hair was streaked with gray now, his face lined with time and waiting. He looked up. For a moment, no one moved. Then she whispered his name. He stood, frozen, then crossed the room in 2 steps. They held each other, sobbing, years of loss breaking loose all at once. The children stared. Papa, the little girl asked softly. He dropped to his knees. Yes, he whispered. I'm here. The old man turned away, his eyes burning. When it was time to leave, the woman approached him. What will happen to you? She asked quietly. He looked at the road ahead. I'll finally pay my debts, he said. As he watched the family drive away, laughter filling the car for the first time in years, the old man felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest. Not relief. Redemption. The supermarket at the edge of the city always felt like a place where people brought their quiet defeats. Late in the evening, it absorbed exhaustion the way its polished floor absorbed the glare of fluorescent lights. Automatic doors sighed open and closed, releasing tired customers into the cold and swallowing new ones just as weary. The air smelled of bread baked hours ago, cleaning chemicals, and impatience. The checkout line at the far register barely moved. A young cashier sat behind the counter, scrolling briefly on her phone between customers, then snapping back into her role with exaggerated efficiency. Her uniform was neat, her makeup perfect, her expression sharp and unyielding, as though kindness were an inconvenience she could not afford. In front of her stood a woman who looked like she had already apologized to the world too many times. Her coat was thin and faded, buttons mismatched, sleeves slightly too short. She held herself stiffly, as if trying to take up as little space as possible. 3 children hovered around her like anxious birds. One boy leaned against her leg, another child clutched the side of a stroller, and inside it a baby slept, unaware of the tension that wrapped the scene like a wire pulled too tight. The woman placed her groceries on the counter slowly. Each item made a soft sound against the surface. Bread, pasta, rice, a small carton of milk, apples in a cheap plastic bag. She avoided eye contact, already bracing herself. The scanner beeped rhythmically. The cashier announced the total without looking up. It was more than the woman expected. It was always more. She inhaled sharply and opened her wallet. Inside were worn bills folded and unfolded countless times, coins collected with care. Her hands shook as she counted, lips silently forming numbers. Just a second, she whispered. Please. The people behind her shifted. Someone sighed loudly, another tapped their foot. The cashier leaned back, crossing her arms. If you don't have enough, you'll need to decide quickly, she said flatly. There's a line. I'll put something back, the woman said, panic creeping into her voice. She reached for the milk, then hesitated. Her eyes flicked to her children. The little girl tightened her grip on the apples. Mama, she whispered, almost inaudibly. The woman swallowed hard. Maybe the fruit, she murmured, though it sounded like it hurt her to say it. The cashier rolled her eyes. I don't have all night, she said. Either pay or step aside. The words landed with practiced cruelty, the kind that came from repetition rather than malice. Still, they cut. Before the woman could move, a calm voice spoke from behind. There's no reason to talk to her like that. The sound was steady, unhurried, and it carried authority without raising its volume. Heads turned. Conversations died mid-sentence. An old man stood a step back in the line. He was tall, though age had curved his shoulders slightly. His coat was simple and dark, clean and well cared for. His hair was white, combed back neatly. Deep lines traced his face, but his eyes were alert, intelligent, and uncomfortably direct. The cashier scoffed. Sir, this doesn't concern you. The old man nodded once. It concerns anyone who still remembers how fragile dignity can be. The cashier straightened. If you want to help, then help. Otherwise, I do, the old man said gently. He stepped forward and placed his card on the counter. Scan everything. All of it. The cashier hesitated, then smirked, rescanning the items with exaggerated speed. The beeping of the scanner sounded sharper now, almost aggressive. The receipt spilled out in a long strip, curling onto the counter. She read the total again, louder than before. The old man entered his code without pause. Approved. For a moment, no one spoke. Even the hum of the lights seemed quieter. The old man gathered the bags and slid them toward the woman. For your children, he said softly. No one should be made to feel small for trying to feed them. The woman stared at him, disbelief washing over her face. Tears welled and spilled before she could stop them. Thank you, she whispered. I don't know how to thank you. The children stared at him with wide eyes. The boy tugged at her sleeve. Mama, he whispered, who is he? The old man smiled faintly. Just someone who waited too long to do the right thing. As the woman bent to lift the bags, something slipped from her coat pocket and fluttered to the floor. A small photograph, folded many times, its edges worn soft. The old man bent to pick it up. The moment his fingers touched the photograph, his body went still, as if struck by an invisible current. The image showed a man standing outdoors, sunlight catching his face. He wore work clothes dusted with grime, one arm wrapped protectively around the woman now standing in front of him. They were smiling. Not the forced smiles people give cameras, but the kind born from hope. The old man's breath caught painfully. The face stared back at him from a past he had locked away. That's my husband, the woman said quietly when she noticed his reaction. Or, he was. The old man looked up slowly. Was. He disappeared, she said. 5 years ago. Left for work and never came home. The supermarket faded into the background. Sounds dulled. Time folded inward. The old man's fingers tightened slightly around the photograph. The scar near the man's cheek was unmistakable. The eyes. The posture. Recognition was instant and merciless. What's his name? The old man asked, though the question felt pointless. She said it. The name echoed through him like a verdict. He returned the photograph carefully. Did he work construction? He asked. Yes, she replied, startled. How did you know? Did he ever mention trouble? The old man continued. People telling him to stay quiet. Her face changed. He said something wasn't right. He wanted to report it. I begged him not to. We needed the money. The old man closed his eyes briefly. He saw it all again. The reports. The illegal contracts. The accident that was erased with paperwork. A man who refused to look away. A file placed on his desk, presented as a problem to be solved quietly. I owe you more than groceries, he said. Her breath hitched. What do you mean? I know what happened to your husband, he said. And I know why no one ever found him. The cashier stood frozen now, unease creeping across her face. The line behind them had gone silent. Is he? The woman couldn't finish. He's alive, the old man said. The word shattered everything. Her knees buckled, and she grabbed the counter to steady herself. Alive, she whispered. You're sure? Yes, he said. He was forced to disappear. Given a new identity. Hidden far away. You did this? She asked, disbelief trembling in her voice. I allowed it, he replied. I signed the papers. I told myself it was necessary. Tears streamed down her face. Why tell me now? Because today I saw how easily cruelty hides behind routine, he said. And because I'm tired of pretending my past didn't destroy lives. He took a pen, flipped the receipt over, and wrote an address and time. Tomorrow morning, he said. If you want answers. She clutched the paper as if it might vanish. I'll be there, she said. No matter what. That night, the old man didn't sleep. He sat in his apartment, city lights blinking outside the window. He replayed every decision he had buried under success and money. For years, he had told himself that survival required compromise. That one man disappearing was preferable to chaos. Now he saw faces instead of numbers. Morning came gray and cold. The woman arrived early with her children, bundled in coats that didn't quite fit. The old man was already waiting beside a black car. He opened the door silently. The drive was long. The road stretched endlessly. The children eventually fell asleep, unaware that their lives were about to fracture and heal at the same time. They stopped at a forgotten town. A low building stood at its edge, unremarkable by design. Inside, a man sat alone at a small table. His hair was streaked with gray, his face lined by years of waiting. When he looked up and saw her, time collapsed. She whispered his name. He stood, frozen, then crossed the room in 2 steps. They held each other, sobbing, 5 years of loss breaking loose all at once. The children stared. Papa? The little girl asked softly. He dropped to his knees. Yes, he whispered. I'm here. The old man turned away, his vision blurring. Later, as the family prepared to leave together, the woman approached him. What will happen to you? She asked. He looked down the empty road. I'll finally stop running, he said. Whatever that costs. As he watched the car disappear, laughter echoing from inside it, the old man felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest. Not relief. Redemption earned too late, but earned all the same.